Have you ever gone to a beautiful location to do your thing with landscape photography and you've had what can only be described as a complete brain freeze? You don't know what you're doing, you don't know what settings to use, and you know that you want to make the most of a gorgeous opportunity, but you just don't know what you're doing. In this video, I'm going to share with you the single biggest thing that you can do right now to improve your landscape photography. I spend a lot of my time teaching beginner photographers how to shoot on manual mode, and if there's one thing that I've learned is that processes work. Processes, workflows, systems, whatever you want to call them, they're not very sexy, right? But they get results. So imagine that you're cooking a curry, you're going to the effort to cook from scratch and you want this meal to be as delicious as possible. You want it to be the best thing that you've ever eaten. So there's two ways of looking at it. You could either get all the ingredients, bung them in a pan, cook them for 20 minutes and see what happens. Or instead, you could follow a recipe which shows you step by step exactly what you need to do every part of the way. And you can probably guess which one's going to come out on top, right? I want to help you get to a place where you're no longer struck by fear or brain farts, and the more you repeat the process over and over again, it's going to become instinctual. So yes, you're still going to have to do some thinking, but with this process, it's going to become much more natural for you. Now, you don't have to follow this exact process. You might want to tweak it a little bit, and that's okay. But what I want to encourage you to do is to find a workflow, find a system, a process that works for you to make your landscape photography that little bit easier for you. The first thing that I want you to do before you pick up your camera, put all your gear in your boot and start driving somewhere is just slow down and start with some planning. So think about the place that you want to go to, but then do some research so that you can make sure that you're turning up at the best time of year for the kind of photos that you want to take. There's various apps that you can use, and my favourite of all is the Photographer's Ephemeris, and I've done a wee tutorial on that shows you how you can use it to plan your landscape photography. You can also use the Met Office or another weather app so that you can check what the conditions are going to be like. And if you're going to a location by the coast, then you'll want to be checking the tide times as well to make sure that you're there at the right time. Instant Google Street View is another tool that you can use. So if you're going to a brand new location that you haven't been to before, you can pop a wee pin on the map where you think you're going to stand and you can get an idea for what the views are like before you've even gone. When you put all these tools together, it just allows you to get savvy with your landscape photography so you're not turning up and then just hoping for the best. Now let's talk about composition. One of the best things that you can do before you even take a photo is just stop, take a moment and breathe. Don't just turn up to the location, plonk your tripod down, stick your camera on top and start taking photos. I mean, what sort of thought process is that? Look with your eyes first and give yourself time to really immerse yourself in the surroundings and really explore what compositions might work for you. Are there any features that you can use as leading lines to pull your eyes right from the corners of the frame all the way into the distance in your image? Perhaps you could use a wall or a road, or if you're by the coast, is there something in the sand? Is there a nice pattern? What about turning your camera on its side and instead of going for the typical horizontal landscape shot, try a portrait shot instead? Or do you even have to shoot at a wide angle? Is there something in the scene that you could get really closer into the action instead? Or what about shooting from a low angle? There's so many possibilities that when you take a wee moment just to have a wee look around and consider all your possibilities, the options are endless. Once you've found a composition that you're happy with, the next thing I recommend that you nail is your focus. In most cases, I'd recommend that you use autofocus, but when it comes to landscape photography, you want to nail that focus spot on. So if you're using a tripod, I'd absolutely recommend that you use manual focus. If your camera has a live view mode, you can use that so that you can zoom right into the scene. For landscape photography, you're talking typically a third of the way into the scene to make sure that your focus is going to be sharp. But remember to make sure that you change that switch on your lens from autofocus to manual focus before you adjust the focus ring. The last thing that you want to be doing is damaging the mechanics of your lens. Focusing a third of the way into the scene is great if you're using a narrow aperture, so that's a big F number where you want the focus to be sharp all the way from the foreground right into the distance. But if you're wanting to use a wide aperture, which is your small f number, and you're maybe going for a look of a blurry background or blurry foreground, then that's where you want to focus on that one thing. Get really specific here. Moving on, let's talk about white balance, and this is the setting that we use in our camera to make sure that colours look realistic. So we don't want our scenes looking too cool where they've got a horrible blue tone, and we don't want them being too warm either where they've maybe got a bit of an orange cast about them. You need to get that right in camera. Now, if you're shooting on JPEG, this is where you really need to get this right at the time because you're restricted how much you can really play about with that in editing later. But if you shoot on RAW, then you can change your white balance however you like after. But I always think it's right, and you should aim to get it right in camera if you can at the time. As with all photography, you really need to match the preset of the white balance with the conditions that you're shooting in. So if you're shooting in direct sunlight, then daylight is a great option. If it's a bit cloudy, then you would use the cloudy preset. And once you have your white balance set, you really shouldn't have to play about with it too much unless the lighting conditions change dramatically. As for ISO, you want your landscape photography images to be free from digital noise. If you're going to be blowing them up into big prints or wall art, you want them to look the biz. You don't want any nasty little digital noise ruining the look of your photos. And yes, you can correct it later in post-processing, and every individual camera has their limits as to how much noise they can handle. And through time you'll know what yours can handle, but with landscape photography I always say try and keep your ISO as low as possible. So whether that's 50 or 100 ISO for you, don't go any higher than what you ever really need to. Now with aperture, I wouldn't say that there's any hard or fast rules. It all depends on the type of images that you want to take. So think to yourself, what is it that you want to achieve with your photos? If you're looking for an image where the focus is sharp from the foreground all the way into the distance, then you probably want to use an aperture of around about f/16. However, that's not to say that that's the only way to do it. You might want to go for a blurry background or a blurry foreground instead, and that's where you can widen your aperture so you can experiment whatever your lens is capable. Just have a wee play about with it and see what's possible. Moving on, let's talk about shutter speed. Now, if you're using a tripod, which I recommend that you do for landscape photography, then this is really where you can experiment with the shutter speeds that you want to use. Remember that the faster shutter speed that you use, the less amount of time light is coming in for. And at the other end of the scale, if you use a slower shutter speed, then light is coming into your lens and hitting the sensor for a much longer period of time. Perhaps there's some movement in your images. There might be birds flying across the sky and you want to make sure that they're as sharp as possible. So there you just need to use a fast enough shutter speed to capture that movement. Or are you maybe down at the beach and the sun's setting and you want to show that movement in the water, or maybe you want to completely smooth the water out entirely. The key here is understanding the right shutter speed that you need to use to achieve what you want from your images. If you want to do any long exposures of over 30 seconds, that's where you'll need to use your camera's bulb mode to allow you to do that. Once you've got all these things right and you're happy with the images that you're taking, then you could think about possibly using either neutral density or graduated filters, or maybe even a combination of the two. Neutral density filters are going to allow you to have those beautiful long exposures where you could be showing lots of blurry movement in the clouds or even completely smoothing out the water in your image. And graduated filters are going to help you where there's a bit of a tricky balance between the light that's in your image. So you might want to take an image where you're completely smoothing out all the water that's in your image, and then in the top half of your image you've got this beautiful sky that you want to make sure that you don't lose any of the details from. So once you've gone through all those steps and you're happy with the images that you're taking, don't forget to look all around you, because while you're looking at one thing, you're concentrating on the image that's right in front of you. The best action might actually be going on right behind you, and you don't want to miss that. Okay, I hope this video has been helpful for you. Please jump into the comments and let me know, and also let me know if there's any other tips that you've been given that have really helped improve your landscape photography. I'm Anne Johnson, thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos from me that are going to help you improve your photography, then please subscribe to my YouTube channel and I'll catch you soon. Okay, are we any more like it now? I'm still chopping off my head. Low, low, low.